A duel makes the king's magic powerless, which means this trinket is no longer necessary. My name is Neko Drifter, he who will break down this worthy game into its barest essence, comment in any number, counter any argument, but rage bait with your very lives. But if you live by a creed, then show me its strength. Metaphor was not on my radar at all. I vaguely remember seeing it appear on an Xbox showcase, loudly exclaimed, "Wow, Persona 6!" and promptly forgot about it. It wasn't until reviews dropped near release boasting a very high score that I actually got interested. The store page art had me intrigued, and I haven't played a Persona game since 4 came out on Steam in 2020, so I was ready to get stuck in once again. I'm a big Persona fan. You can tell because unlike many, I have actually played the games. All 3 of them. FES, Golden, and Base 5 to be specific. And honestly, with all said and done, Metaphor was my game of the year 2024. I thought the year was pretty mid up until then, and on a stronger year it probably wouldn't have taken the title. But this is a strong recommend for JRPG and social sim lovers alike, with some of the best turn-based gameplay they've done, along with an entertaining story and fun characters, and a unique setting for these Atlas social sim style games at least. Just so glad we are out of school, because Metaphor is a Persona game in all but name.
How's this?
For those not in the know, it wears its inspiration on its sleeve. It's the Sims Medieval of Persona games. New setting, new characters, same gameplay systems. You got your social links, social stats, time management, JRPG dungeons in between long sections of talking to your followers, Jack Frost, the whole shebang. What it offers is a mixture of SMT's press-turn gameplay with the more story-focused dynamics of a Persona game. While Persona sits with its relatively simple combat and massive social sections akin to a visual novel at times, and then on the other side you have Shin Megami Tensei with its complete gameplay focus and a narrative that is more vibes and philosophy. Metaphor sits comfortably in the middle, mixing press turn with the bigger focus on plot and characters. The whole press turn system is the best part of SMT style combat, and I'm glad they adapted it to Metaphor. Press turn is basically that you have your 4 turn orbs at the top, and a weakness or critical hit cuts the orb in half, basically giving another turn. A miss takes 2 turns, and a null or repel take all turns. This accentuates the kind of feast or famine gameplay these titles are known for, with every battle outside of bosses being nuking them while they are stunned or getting unluckily crit and one-shot. And on that I say thank God Metaphor got rid of the if the protagonist dies you game over. That is the worst thing in these games. Besides featuring the usual elements and skills of SMT, this also appends synthesis skills. Attacks that are more powerful while costing the mana of 2 party members, and 2 turn orbs of course, converting to 2 half-turn orbs under the usual crit or weakness conditions. The moment-to-moment fighting is good fun, and you can absolutely blow through battles skipping many animations, which is appreciated. The less long repetitive animations one must suffer through, the better. The final difference is the formation system, letting you put various members in either the front or back line, increasing defense and reducing physical attack while at the back. It adds a small layer of depth, with some skills moving the party that you can time to counter strong attacks. And finally, there's the retry button. On your turn at any time, freely rewind back to the start of the fight. I'm torn on this, because on the one hand you can negate bullshit RNG resulting in a party wipe if, say, half the party gets crit and dies, but at the same time it brings into greater focus the amount of random RNG things that can just screw you over. I struggled so hard going in to fight the side dungeon Minotaur near the start of the game way too early and beat him by retry scumming till I hit him with sleep and then just went to town. Now, where Metaphor differs most greatly from its sister series is how it handles jobs. Instead of recruiting or fusing demons, Metaphor offers a large number of archetypes gained via leveling your social links. These archetypes have a set number of skills, syntheses, and passives, with you also getting to add up to 4 skills from other archetypes after reaching the required bond. I like that they're trying something different with the leveling system, and it is nice to be able to thoroughly customize all your party members' kits as well. However, the measly 4 inheritable skill slots means you are pigeonholed into choosing a class, which is fine for most of the game, until you reach the royal archetypes, which just blow every other class out of the water, particularly the protagonist and Heismays, just being so much better than everything else. So the build variety sort of follows a bell curve, coalescing into everyone just using royal archetypes or merchant stacks by the end. And lastly, the archetypes just aren't as visually striking as the demons of SMT. Some of them look pretty cool, but SMT demons are just iconic at this point. It was nice to see a few of them while using the Devil Summoner archetype. Overworld is slightly more intricate than past games, with a dodge roll and a number of hits required to attain the advantage battle. And when your characters outlevel a mob enough, you can just kill them without going turn-based. Overlevel enough and the game can become an incredibly stiff-feeling Dynasty Warriors as you mow down hordes of skeletons for 10 XP a pop. I love it because I'm not big on grinding, so this kept the flow of the dungeons moving smoothly with not having to fight the same mob an excruciating amount of times. Besides that, dungeons follow that Persona formula of managing your MP as you annihilate trash mobs in that golden wish to beat it in one day for time slots, which, as is tradition, was hardest at the very start and became very manageable by mid-game. It kind of creeps back up by the end with many late-game skills costing crazy amounts of MP, but switching between all the party members alleviates such issues. The hardest part of the game was doing the Minotaur side dungeon at the beginning and then the dragon that sets your party health to 300 near the end due to those unavoidable constraints. And besides that, the game was very manageable. Having Hulkenberg as the parry and taunt merchant or Heismay as the dodging turn eater just made every late game fight almost impossible to lose. One big thing Metaphor diverges from Persona on is having actual side dungeons. There is no Tartarus or Mementos. Outside of main dungeons, you instead travel to a variety of locales to complete bounties and side quests for money and XP. These dungeons are pretty boring. They are almost universally monotone box corridors filled with mobs or open air corridors with trees on the side. They do offer some gimmicks, particularly with some of the later ones, but for the most part they feel maybe slightly less dull than Mementos. The way the final month of the game is structured does this no favours as you slog through these for a majority of that time. The main dungeons by comparison are quite interesting, with each having a little gimmick. Stealthing through the sewers of Brilehaven, the raid on the Charadrius, the absolute maze that is the Dragon Temple. I thought every dungeon was great with a unique look and flavour. It's a shame then that there really aren't many of them, and once you've beaten the Dragon Temple they fall off hard even though there's still another 40 or so hours of gameplay. I can only assume it is due to budget or time constraints. The most obvious gap is with the Mage Academy, which I fully expected to be an entire dungeon, but that whole section of the game feels rushed. The Eldan Sanctum too could perhaps have been expanded. It was quite intricate for an area you visit once and can never return to. Even the final dungeons feel quite short, with a rehashing of the Royal Palace and 2 areas of Magla Space Rock without any interesting gameplay moments. Hunting down the real humans in the Royal Palace, which was already done in the Dragon Temple, really felt like they were padding for time. But all the dungeons up to the Dragon Temple, I really enjoyed. So the gameplay is good on a mechanical level, and the dungeons are decent for the most part, but gameplay is not really why people play these games, or at least not the main reason. We're here for the characters, style, and the story. So let's talk about the real nitty-gritty. There's more gameplay discussion to come, of course, but we'll look at that in step with story moments. First thing to mention is the most important part and one Atlus always nails, the UI. It is fantastic as usual. Atlus games are no graphical powerhouses, but their incredibly stylish UIs help to mask the, at times, ugly 3D models and low-resolution textures. Metaphor abandons Persona's block colours of red, yellow and blue to instead mix main motifs of black, blue and red. You can observe this theming quite clearly by just scrolling down the pause menu. The colours are notably more rustic and worn. The splotchy nature mimic that of a painting, the kind of details you see by standing really close and admiring the actual material a painting is made from. It makes sense to switch to this. It helps Metaphor stand apart from the Persona series as its own thing. The game leans heavily on Renaissance and Belle Epoque era influences, Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man emblazoned upon the back of the archetype screen, the whole plot revolving around Thomas More's 1516 book Utopia, while the title of the game is in Esperanto, a language created in the late 1800s to cast down barriers and unite people with a common word, to little success. But the reason for its use in Metaphor becomes obvious pretty fast. Both these eras are notable for their vast strides in philosophy, morality, and the questioning of established order, and all this dressing just sucked me into the narrative the game wished to tell. It doesn't lean as heavily on Jungian thought as Persona does, but its influences remain. Shoji Meguro returns along with Atsushi Kitajo and Toshiki Konishi for the OST, and it's really good. The main battle theme is probably the most iconic, with its monk chanting the but there are other fantastic pieces throughout. The Gauntlet Runner theme really gives that feeling of going on a grand journey with friends. The theme for traversing the desert at the very start goes unnecessarily hard, or at least that's what it seems until it returns much later in the game. Wings of Freedom is a fantastic track full of intrigue for plot developments in the back half of the game. Requiem for a Hero hitting as the curtain falls is just all around incredible. And of course, the final battle incorporates the main menu's theme motif. Always love when media does that. It's like playing the anime opening in the final episode. It's pure cinema every time. The OST is chock full of fantastic tracks that elevate the experience as the other key half that carries the game that doesn't really look that great in the 3D model department. Fantastic art and music create an atmosphere that stays captivating the whole way through. Now, the music is good, but it's good in the way that it sets the scenes in context. It's not the kind of soundtrack I would listen to in my spare time like Persona is, and even some Megaten tracks. Persona is wall-to-wall bangers. Color Your Night from Reload might be the best song they've ever done. What a tune. And even Megaten has songs I'll put on occasionally, like SMT4's Bosch theme with the tubular bells, and SMT3 with Metaphor doesn't really have any song that I think, I remember that one, let's stick it on. It all works exceptionally well for the game, but doesn't elevate itself to a tier beyond the game like other SMT tracks. Now, the biggest thing that interested me about Metaphor was, after learning it's a Persona-style game, just how completely different the setting is to their previous titles. We are not in an apocalypse or meandering about a school fighting the collective unconscious. We are in an honest-to-God fantasy world, one that wants you to focus on how its world functions, complete with a compendium explaining locales, concepts, peoples, and customs. The main things that hooked me immediately were the tribes, some riffing off fantasy tropes while others put a unique spin on traits. Learning the characteristics of the 9 tribes was a real treat throughout the early game, and the other thing was the racism. I had no idea it was going to take such a strong stance, but I can respect it. A Japanese developer tackling multiculturalism and race-based tensions in a stratified and unequal society? I was so in. Their observations and thoughts on these issues I was excited to hear, but more on that in the story section. The thing I would like to point out is the land, specifically Uchronia being a fantasy UK crossed with the map of Utopia from the book. The Annex War owning what is the equivalent of Scotland, Wales and Ireland, with the capital being our Londinium. And because it's a fantasy parallel of the UK, we got the accents. Choosing British voice actors for this game elevated my enjoyment to a whole other level, because it wasn't just the usual shebang of accents. We got Stroll with his posh southern English tone, fitting of his noble status.
I would live, fight and die a noble, sir. To have done otherwise would betray my title, to say nothing of my heart.
Hulkenberg puts on a Nordic Germanic kind of thing.
Then let us be bound in both purpose and trust. My life is your shield, and my blade is your strength.
Heismay isn't really British, but his deep voice contrasts his looks so well.
I am Heismay Noctul. I believe the arc of life depends not upon birth. By these hands soiled or sinless, I fight!
Zorba was wild. Seeing that goth twink come out with such a heavy Glaswegian accent was hilarious.
You defile Lord Luis with this blasphemy! You'll pay! I swear! I'll make you regret this!
Juna has a kind of mix. It reminds me of a posh Dubliner, but it's also very West Country, Cornwall area.
Why, Gladell, surely you can spare some manners for a crew that saved our lives?
Yufa and the Mustari are Welsh.
I think I've found a world I want to be a part of. To that end, everyone, I look forward to our journeys together.
And of course, our boys, Fidelio and Basilio, are proper fucking Scousers, lad.
We've got the arms. We'll clear him out of the way.
Got it. If we don't kill the thing, we're all sunk.
Don't get used to it.
Fuck does Kuno care? My only wish is that Basilio would have said scran at some point. Maybe he does and I missed it. There is a bit of slang thrown in, notably with Nura saying Ballywell a lot.
Why, I'm very well touched. It positively jokes man up.
And again, the Scousers putting dead and like everywhere. The voice cast elevated this game several points for me, and in my opinion, the freshness just puts it far above Persona for me. Sorry, Yankees. It is a shame then that so much of the game is unvoiced. After Persona 3 Reload had so much voice acted, it's a shame to see Metaphor regress. Even some main dungeon cutscenes go unvoiced. It was so disappointing. If Disco Elysium could voice like a million words, I think we could have had all the social links voiced at least, but whatever. I just learned the deadline failure scenes are voiced, something 99.9% of players will never see. Seriously guys, what were your priorities? Anyway, when it came to enemies and personas, I'm a bit more mixed. The archetypes in this case are pretty much just personas, but their looks never hit as hard as the crazy demon designs do in SMT. Like, I can remember the prints, but most of them end up having this grey Magitech look with designs that don't pop so much. Seeing some of the classic characters while using Devil Summoner just confirmed it. Jack Frost clears all these fools, sadly. Enemies wise, there are some of the coolest looking enemies they've ever done, particularly with some of the humans riffing off the artwork of Hieronymus Bosch, another 15th century influence to the pile, particularly his painting depicting hell. You see the weird egg-faced man thing that was also in Berserk, and the ear knife, the fish with legs. It's pretty cool. And on the other hand, you just have generic goblins, ogres, skeletons, and dogs. Typical fantasy baddies, which are meh. The little tooth guys are kind of the mascot of the game, the Jack Frost equivalent, and they're alright, but not nearly as iconic. Instead of saying hee-ho, they just like give tips in the dungeons. Overall, I like the game's artistic approach. It's unique enough, and the 2D art in particular is as fantastic as always. The game falters quite a bit on the 3D models. Some of these environments are downright ugly. It's like I'm in the Forest of the Fallen Giants again, my god. Atlas once again uplifting a game that looks like a PS3 launch title with gorgeous 2D artwork and style. But at times, the game looks worse than even Persona 5 did in 2017. Perhaps they're just not used to designing open landscapes after making cities for the past 10 years. But I think even SMT 5 looks a lot nicer. I don't know. Just as a final addendum, like SMT 5 and Persona 3 Reload are both in Unreal Engine 4, and they look fantastic. So whether it's the engine or the team just didn't want to focus on it, I don't know. But they can look good, it's just not their priority. Anyway, I've said what I've said. Let's just move on. While the style drew me in, what hooked me was the setup for the story. An original medieval world with Persona mechanics and an interesting conflict brewing. A classic vacuum of power tale with a charismatic Griffith looking dude, classic evil church, and conspiracy abound. This was enough to get me through the first 10 or so hours of the demo, which I must add is one of the best things Atlas has done, is have these really long demos. These games are infamously slow burns at the beginning, so such a long intro really allows it to get its hooks in you. Several points throughout I thought, alright, this is the end surely, and then it just kept going. Stroll is a great first companion, and Gallica is infinitely less annoying than Morgana and unfathomably less annoying than Teddy. Grius had a genuinely unhinged amount of death flags. The man was old, he has a wife and kid, doesn't get an archetype, and a suicide mission to run up and assassinate Luis. Unsurprisingly, he bites it. It would have been cool to have a grizzled veteran as a companion, but I suppose it wasn't to be. Following the assassination attempts, the reveal of the King's magic and Forden's royal tournament are what really sold me. It's a damn steel ball run. Across the country, a variety of challenges to determine who becomes king. It's an incredible setup, and it works so well for the Persona style of time management, because you are constantly on the move and the deadlines always make sense. Well, the rock falling delay in Martira is kinda nonsense, but other than that it makes perfect sense. While Persona meanders a lot in the middle of Persona 4 and 5, and for like 80% of the game in Persona 3, Metaphor proceeds at a breakneck pace. A mere 4 months ensures there is little downtime, right? Anyway, the duo recruit Hulkenberg and the classic starter trio is complete. Stroll is very gentlemanly and does not fall into the horny idiot archetype of Junpei, Ryuji, and Yosuke. Hulkenberg reminds me of Chie with her love of food and more tomboyish attitude. Zorba, as I mentioned, is just such a whiplash of a character between design and voice. The contrast kinda makes it more interesting, but I don't really like the guy and suspected he'd return initially. Then I forgot about him for most of the game until Luis died and I began speculating how he was going to get out of it. But anyway, the party departs the capital and the game truly begins. Persona 5's initial concept was backpacking, traveling around in a journey of self-discovery. This concept is kind of implemented in Strikers, but its true materialization is here in Metaphor. The journey to Martira is so cozy, reminiscent of a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Training on the Gauntlet Runner, setting up camp for the night, stopping to see interesting landmarks. It's a very whimsical version of a fantasy journey. Our trio, or quartet I guess, with Muris joining, united in common cause against Luis, not for the crown but to save the prince. The group hunts the notorious criminal Heisme to win Luis's favor and infiltrate his inner circle. I will add that I saw no promo at all going into the game, not even the screenshots on the store page, so I had no idea what Heisme looked like or that he would be a party member. My initial speculation was that Heisme was framed and this would end up in us finding them to then uncover the true culprit, but it was a great surprise to see the alleged killer was a tiny bat creature with a cute face and an incredibly deep voice. I guess we really do get an old man party member. Heisme is one of the most interesting and dynamic characters in the party. The death of his son during the Parapus riots leads us to having a racist party member, which is genuinely very important for the message Metaphor wishes to disperse. Nice people can be the most racist, anyone with a grandmother can attest to that. I kinda wish Heisme was more racist to the Parapus. It comes up several times that he dislikes them, and it flares up once or twice once a Parapus actually joins the party, but overall it should have been way more prominent, especially as a mini-arc to fill in the 30-day free time at the end of the game. His VA is so damn good. Every time he shouts, "Rancor!" The contrasting voice and appearance here is just as different but less awkward than Zorba's. And he loves to yap about his agility, which if you've ever unlocked his royal archetype, you know he is not exaggerating. On Heisme's racism, let's run it back quickly. Back to our protagonist's first visit to the capital. One thing I will say is that I was pleasantly surprised at how this game handles racism. A lot of games fail miserably in this regard. Final Fantasy 16. Metaphor handles it shockingly well. I'm a Asian, if you could tell, behind the eyes, and Irish, and let me tell you, the racism of Metaphor is genuinely bang on. Some people are blatant with it, experienced particularly during COVID. Others express bizarre stereotypes born of ignorance. Back in school, a girl once asked if I only like other Asian women because I'm Asian, which is a silly question, because there were no Asian women anywhere where I live. There are like 5 Asians in the whole area. I live rural, I'm not in Dublin. This kind of attitude resonates well as an Elda, a race that is rarely seen and spoken of in legend. Notable is the systemic racism imposed upon Elda by the church, defining them as devils, resulting in discrimination not just by the populace, but by the institutions of the world. On your first trip to the capital, people speak of you in hushed tones, some to your face, even of their distaste. Others express curiosity and lament your plight. The variety of people's responses is what got me. If everyone in the city universally hated Elda, it would be silly. The fact that despite the state's propaganda, hate falters is so pivotal. For all the pro-slavers of the past, John Brown existed too. The racial politics weave together with the class dynamics in Grand Trad. The Parapus live in poverty, are arrested and executed at higher rates, are experimented on unethically in Fidelio and Basilio's story. The parallels should be obvious. Metaphor is in your face about it, hence the video title, but everyone being a fantasy race I think shields it from feeling too ham-fisted, and how genuine it tries to be also accentuates that feeling. The Clamar and Rusant dominate the nobility, with the Rusant being military masters. It's funny in this world that elves are the strongest race, with the women being stronger than the men, fitting Hulkenberg's character. Ishkia are few in number but mainly occupy the intelligentsia, scholars and the like, and Roags with their long lives entrench themselves in institutions that value seniority. On the other hand, Parapus are as populous as Clamar and Rusants, yet treated as an underclass associated with beggars and thieves. Ugif are small in population and, due to their distinct looks, are heavily discriminated and as such stay in remote locales amongst themselves. As a result, they too are xenophobic to the other tribes, as seen in Haisme and Brigitte's social links. Nydia are known as charismatic yet deceitful, and also remain in their own villages mostly, yet those that venture out cloud themselves in a magic that hides their true form, that of a chibi little creature as seen in Juna's link. A secret that seems kind of insane logistically to have what the entire race universally hides their true forms, but it works enough for such things to be resigned to hearsay. Mustari are unique in that they don't believe in the Sanctus Church, the state religion of Uchronia instead believing in a dragon god. This of course leads them to persecution outside the archipelago they mainly dwell, but some are seen outside of which donning helmets which mask their face. Altabury Heights was a Mustari settlement before being annexed by Uchronia, with its inhabitants forced to convert to Sanctism. Due to this, they too distrust all the other tribes. What's very well done is that not only are the privileged tribes racist to the underclass, but said lower tribes are also racist to each other. Another very important fact of life, this game includes. Ugif distrusts Parapus. The Clamar and Rusant often butt heads. One of the candidates is an open Rusant supremacist hating the Clamar's privilege. It's very well done, the dynamics interlocking and stacking upon each other, taking a critical lens to diverse society, showing its ugly side, but also sprinkles of beauty in the people that help each other and work together, particularly with our main party. Having a member of every tribe as the final cast is no coincidence. The other racial aspect that impressed me so much was Maria's social link. Best child character Atlas have ever made. I'm sorry, she just clears Nanako. I never cared much about Nanako because to me, she always felt like an anime child, you know, playing up the cutesy factor, and she's mainly there to add depth to Dojima's character by showing what a shit father he is. Maria, to me, just felt more genuine, and her social link involves goals and aspirations, dreams of the world from the book, but through the eyes of a child, and thusly, her goals too are realistic for a child, to accept her dad's death and live in a world where she isn't picked on for being any different. Because importantly, Maria is mixed race. As a mixed race person who also lost their dad when they were young, Maria's social link affected me more than any character's plight in any Atlas game. I felt so damn bad for this child because I see a version of me in an infinitely worse situation. If you're a mixed race, you might know the struggles of belonging to my Irish identity and Chinese heritage, neither truly feeling full. The fact that some people will never see you as truly Irish, or that I would be like any other foreigner in China, seeing as I don't know a lick of Mandarin. And these attitudes in Uchronia are like times 10. mixed races are seen as freaks by all purebred tribes for completely irrational reasons, and it is attitudes implanted onto the kids by adults. Her story of wanting to see the world, her self-hatred stemming from prejudice and grief, blaming herself for her father's death, it was genuinely incredible. One of the best links they've ever done. In Metaphor 2, please Atlas, make an older Maria a party member or hell the protagonist, traveling the world and learning all its beauty and ugliness.
I used to want to run away from Grand Trad so badly. I didn't feel at home here. So I thought there was someplace else I should go to. I wanted Miss Fabian to like me so much. But the more important thing really was if I liked Miss Fabian. When I realized that, I learned that I can pick where my home is. I can choose where I belong. And right now, I've picked this place. This is my home.
With that aside, back in Martira, Heisme is captured, yet the disappearances persist, meaning someone else is our true culprit. This leads us to the second main dungeon underneath the castle. This arc focuses mainly on the grief a parent can feel for losing their child, reflected in Heisme's self-destruction and Sanctoress Joanna's selfish terror. It's a shockingly dark section involving a child-eating baby human that Joanna has deluded herself into thinking is her child. She acts proper mental during the fight, but once the baby's down, it feels like she has her own mini-arc in about a minute as she regrets her actions. The party's reaction here kind of confused me. Stroll was perfectly fine killing Heisme even knowing nothing about him, but he displays a shocking amount of sympathy for a child murderer. Fully trusting her to turn herself in was a bit crazy, but I guess the naive optimism of our main characters is a characteristic seen throughout the game. It's a tough nut to crack that the only way to topple such a respected power as a Sanctoress required her to admit her crimes herself, but it was very much putting their eggs in one basket. And Stroll should not have questioned letting her sacrifice herself. It just doesn't feel right to have him, a man who purports justice, to have so much sympathy for a criminal so grave. Like, her crimes are seriously bad. It's not a morally grey action. It's literally feeding people, including children, to a human. It felt like the writers struggled to escape their more soft storytelling of Persona when the world of Metaphor is infinitely more gritty and miserable, and a healthy bit of pragmatism is sometimes necessary. Maybe I'd understand it more if I had a child. I liked the rest of the arc, but the conclusion wasn't great. With Martira cleared, you get the silliest reason for a delay in any Atlas game ever, with a rock blocking the road for just the right amount of time for your deadline. Whatever, I feel like it could have been related to Joanna's trial, the party in Barden deliberating or something, not just a rock. Anyway, while here we meet the Nydia follower Alonso and some of the other candidates on the road. Most of the minor candidates beyond the big three are at times silly, at times deranged. Some of their motivations are small, like Lena and Loveless with free alcohol or just as an ad for their business. Others have crazy plans like Milo's beautyocracy or Rudolph's Roussant supremacy. They add a lot of spice to the early and mid game with their antics, but ultimately fall to the wayside as the game advances its plot. I was really shocked Rudolph doesn't end up being a main antagonist by the end. You just kind of beat his ass in a side mission, and he's still around by the epilogue. A symptom of budget and time, I can only assume, but it was disappointing how these characters end up mere set dressing for the competition. Alonso and Brigitta's bonds pick up around this time, and I must say it is nice that being a setting rife with conflict means the social links actually have shit happen in them for a change. So many links in Persona are so damn boring, but in Metaphor you have Brigitta navigating the shady world of igniters, leading to threats on what she holds dear, and culminates in a village of Ujifs being almost destroyed in her fury, and then destroyed for real to frame her. Alonso similarly involves the death of his mother, his town destroyed, and all his schemes catching up to him, leading to his untimely death, which of course becomes the ultimate fakery. Atlas hiding his true fate behind a mission post-Bond was cute. They had me going for a second there in Bond 8. The landlord just turning himself in by the end was a bit too all's well that ends well, like sometimes bad people get away with things. It would have been bittersweet. While the Bonds certainly have better conflicts, the problem remains that since our protagonist still rarely speaks, it feels like these links are often just a character yapping to themselves. We don't do shit half the time, and they love us. It's not quite as silly as Persona, but it's there. And of course, them being optional means the problem of no main story integration is still there. It's why Persona 3's cast is remembered so fondly. The problem of characters falling into irrelevancy after their arc is prevalent in this game too, particularly with Haizme and Yufa. It's good that you don't need points from correct answers to skip dead days, with the points just giving you magla. Metaphor in general has a load of lovely quality of life features I hope they bring forward into Persona 6, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The journey continues to Port Brilehaven, and it's a cool place. The visual of Magla causing all those water spheres to float was pretty neat. Forden, with his hand forced, executes Joanna on the spot. Forden is great. He's a manipulative little bastard, obviously using sanctism for his own ends, and he's a perfect secondary antagonist next to Luis in the first half of the game. Since Luis's true motives are unknown, the party conflicting with Forden and the church display how rotten the society of Uchronia really is, and thusly show why Luis's words ring true in the hearts of so many. But state power is overbearing, and Forden remains the top choice for most of the game. The competition in general seems to play on the farcical nature of some countries' democracies. A song and dance, but things never change. It's merely to give Forden's inevitable win a meritocratic feel, even if the entire competition is rigged from the ground up by the church, who is basically the de facto power in Uchronia, following Hythlodaeus' death and even beforehand. I assume the obvious comparison is the LDP's almost continuous reign in Japan since the 1950s, but out west here we have obvious examples of people being mad about no one representing them and having big elections resulting in the same faces being elected every time. Irish people love to whine about the state of the country, but time and time again, Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil win majority every single time. Brilehaven slows down the pace as you just kind of hang out here as the calm before the storm. Your mission is to infiltrate Luis's gauntlet runner to steal the formula for the prince's poison. This is a bizarre dungeon with a goofy infiltration that could only work in Luis's might makes right attitude. He knows you do it, but he doesn't care, really, seeing you as too weak to stop him anyway. And the guards you beat get kicked out of the force for losing. That it all works out is a miracle, but the fact that this is what our party went with again shows their naive optimism, which combined with Martira really cements that our party are not smart, and will fight for what's right if we all believe in each other, or whatever. It's still a JRPG at the end of the day. Following this goofy section of riding your sword along the wings of the Charadrius, Juna attains her archetype of the masked dancer and you battle Gladel. Juna's infiltration of Luis's entourage in true service to the prince fits her deceptive nature. Both her and Alonso as Nydia focus mainly on how perception of someone impacts reality. Juna's in particular with her social link revealing that insane thing about Nydia and their chibi forms. It's the most interesting part of her link, really. The story itself was whatever. I can understand the frustration of having a more popular singer usurp your role and getting jealous, but it was a classic case of a social link being more about an NPC than the character. Anne in Persona 5 is another example. Juna herself isn't the most interesting, but it's her relation with the Parapus brothers Fidelio and Basilio, as well as Luis and later Rella, that is so interesting. One thing that is genuine is that she really does love singing, and that becomes her whole bit. She's the singer. Like Akihiko with training or Chie with meat, not my favourite. Gladel, on the other hand, he was pretty fun. He's pathetic, a dickhead and a narcissist, but he gets shit on throughout his time in the story. Being rescued by us, his offer of a human head failing to win over the crowd, and finally getting his ass beat atop the Charadrius. His final action is to attempt to assassinate our protagonist, prompting him to be killed by the king's magic, revealing both his weakness and our newfound popularity. He sucks, but I like him because he's a fun bottom tier villain. He's a mook with some character, and we needed a boss for this dungeon. Following the Charadrius incident and learning that no antidote exists, our party continues to the next stage of the competition, plundering the pagan lands of divine relics for the Sanctus Church. Luis tasks us with finding the legendary lance Dracadios, so our next step is to head to Virga Island, capital of the Mustari people. Fidelio and Basilio tag along throughout this journey, and it really helps to develop their characters. They add a nice dynamic to the group with their distrust of our loyalty. Fidelio trusting in Lady Juna since he's a little smitten, and Basilio's faith in Luis being tested as he stays with our party. At the island, we see a Mustari girl bathing before promptly getting arrested by the locals. The Parapus brothers proceed to ditch us. In the prison, we meet the announcer for the King's Tournament, Barden. It's a pretty funny moment as he starts yapping out of nowhere and the camera just pans over to him sitting there already. I was so suspicious of Barden. The whole game, I really didn't trust this man to not betray us at some point, but he's genuinely a good guy the whole way through. One of several surprises for character outcomes. He's just insatiably curious, which naturally led him to questioning the Sanctus Church and backing our party for their interesting belief in equality of all tribes. He's a cool guy who never stops trusting our cause. The Parapus brothers eventually free the party and calm tensions with the Mustari. The candidate from earlier reveals himself as the chief of their tribe and his sister the one we spotted bathing earlier. She has chosen to sacrifice herself to the dragon god that dwells within the temple north of Virga Island. Our party agrees to save her and in turn find Dracodios within the temple. What follows is a dungeon unlike any seen before. This dungeon is my favorite in the entire game. But I really enjoy longer maze-like dungeons that force you to confront MP constraints, and besides an early game side dungeon, this is the only one that had me struggling. This dungeon is unlike any other in the game as you descend into a classic Mayan-style temple, eventually fighting your way to Yufa, who is praying in an antechamber. She follows the party further below, and the next part is crazy for two different reasons depending on how much you know. For me, I was just surprised to see outside a window underneath the temple was none other than Shinjuku. Atlas, I swear, this is like the 4th time you've shown us a post-apocalyptic world with Tokyo Underground. And that point is the exact stickler, because this entire dungeon, from items to map layout, is one-to-one with the dungeon Lost Shinjuku in Etrian Odyssey. I've never played that game, but it must have been a crazy moment if you had. I'm generally not fond of overly relying on references in media. It's why Dark Souls 3 is my least favorite Souls game despite its gameplay improvements. But the fact that Etrian Odyssey is so old and also originally a DS game kind of dulls the blow. It's so far removed from metaphor that I guarantee most players have no idea what it's referencing. Hell, Etrian Odyssey came out in 2007. Some players probably weren't even alive when it released. Don't let it sink in, don't let it sink in. Anyway, this dungeon is a banger. Don't get me wrong, it's hellishly long and an absolute maze, and finding out it's a copy of another game's level made me less impressed. But as someone who's never experienced it, it was a great map. I don't think this is a prequel to Etrian Odyssey or anything, it's mostly a reference of which there are so many to other Atlas games. Soul Hacker, Devil Summoner, Persona Master, but this one seems the most explicit. You also get to see the ear knife humans from Bosch's paintings, which are pretty cool enemies I must say. Murals throughout put dents in the Mustari faith's belief that a sacrifice will save their village, and it all comes to a head at the deepest part. The dragon god is possessed by a human and attacks the party. Yufa, who has been reconsidering her sacrifice's meaning, awakens to her archetype of the Devil Summoner. The human is separated from the dragon, and a final mural reveals that the priestess is not to die to the dragon, but to wield its soul from within the weapon Dracodios, and ward off all threats to the island. The party escape to find the human terrorizing Virga Island. Yufa slays it with Dracodios and gains the faith of her people. And Edeni gives the island a new name. Etria. Etria. And thus concludes our Etrian Odyssey. God damn. Let's talk Yufa. A lot of people find her boring, but let me tell you, I love her. I always like these softer spoken yet confident types. Haru was my favorite in Persona 5, for example. Yufa does have most of her character explored in this Virga Island arc, but what keeps her relevant, I feel, is her follower bond. The actual story of it is typical fish out of water, learning about the world and more showings of how much sanctism sucks. That they've done many times, but what differs in Yufa's is the romance angle. So going in, I didn't know Metaphor did not have any romance options, which is crazy to me. The creator of the series that's all about bullshit high school harem power fantasy has no romance? And then I learned it's even crazier. It's not that it has no romance, it has a canon romance. Was? But the self-insert, the fantasy. Was? The ballsiness, I had to respect it. Nothing explicit happens, but it is so clear.
It led me to a realization. I only want to live in a world where you exist.
I feel the same way as you, Yufa.
Do you mean I can stay by your side? Truly, you'll grant me something so special. It's all I could ask for.
The hand holding on top of the gauntlet runner as she basically proclaims her love. If that wasn't clear, Edeni spells it out if you go talk to him after. She basically tries to marry you at the end. And it fits really well for Will's character. An Elda and a Mostari, two persecuted tribes uniting for a better world. It mirrors King Ithlodeus and his Eldan wife. It works perfectly. There are other theoretical options, of course. Juna is a big one, it gets mildly flirty. Katharina gets hints to it at the end, and others think of Gallica. I personally don't see that one. She's more of a mother figure or mentor to me, and she's a bit small. I've played Black Souls. I know how these things can go wrong. The rest of the characters don't really hit a romantic angle. Hulkenberg wants that Sesbian Lex with Juna from what I could tell. Also, if you don't believe in Yufa canon, that's fine. I'm not here for the waifu wars. It's just my read. And it's correct. Other than that, I mainly love her voice and how she can be at times silly and at times serious. That scene of her and Hulkenberg getting drugged up on the fruits was pretty great, and her bluntness is endearing, like when she just calls Milo a disgusting, vapid narcissist who doesn't know what beauty is at all, or how quickly she learns to hate Luis as much as us for his callous statement that he would destroy Virga Island if we had failed to attain Dracadios. With our relic attained, Yufa joins us as we continue onwards to Altabury Heights. Altabury Heights is the collapsing stage. It is the place where the most plot happens and also the beginning of the end for pacing. The budget constraints rear their ugly heads in full force during this section. Dracadios becomes the centerpiece that our story spins around. Its ability to bypass the king's magic makes Luis a threat to Forden, and us a threat to Luis. The plan seems simple: to sneak into the opera house during the displaying of the relics to assassinate Luis with the spear. It's interesting that enemies can't kill you in this section, so they attack Yufa, some fun narrative harmony. The whole time I'm expecting this to go wrong, but seemingly we nail the shot and Luis goes down. However, we fail to retrieve the spear, and upon attempting to leave, Luis arrives injured yet alive. With the spear in his possession, the only option is to challenge him to a duel, which he graciously accepts. The man Luis could never back down from such a bold display of power.
My name is Luis Guiaburn. I am the rightful king, he who will forge anew this unworthy country into a utopia. Attack in any number, wield any weapons, but fight with your very lives. If you live by a creed, show me its strength.
The resulting fight is shockingly easy. Even injured, I expected Luis to do anything, but we wiped the floor with him. Is this really the big bad? I was having my doubts, and my thought at this point was that Forden would be the new villain, except Psyche Godot would usurp him in some way and become the true villain, since the game hinted at him feeling scorn for being chosen over Rella. Luis almost wins in the cutscene, but gets sneak attacked with a Dracadios to the spine and falls through the skylight, landing straight in front of Forden and all the onlookers. The party rushes down with Forden, congratulating the party for defeating him and ensuring Sanctus victory. With the prince's curse lifted, the party graciously bow out. Except that night they find the curse remains, throwing their cause into disarray. Hulkenberg recalls how Forden suspiciously referenced the night of the prince's assassination, details no one but the culprit would know. They confront him the next day, but words mean nothing at this point, as Forden condemns the party to die for their insolence. But then, before that can happen, Luis reveals he's alive. At this exact point I thought, oh, the Necromancer! And sure enough, Glaswegian twink Zorba makes his grand return. Having survived our encounter in Grand Trad, the man has been worming his way into the Sanctus ranks as a physician, most likely thanks to his mastery of necromancy, meaning he's a great healer. And sure enough, he has healed Luis fully. Forden attempts to kill Luis with Dracadios, but is enraptured by the king's magic, because not only did Zorba heal Luis, he swapped the real Dracadios with the fake. Man, this henchman is doing everything. Good thing he's a zealot. Forden is slain and Luis now holds all the cards. He infers that the prince yet lives from the party's actions, and after we refuse to speak, attempts to kill a random family still cowering in the auditorium. This is the final straw for our Parapus brothers, and they instead block the blast, with Fidelio giving his life in the process. A broken Basilio laments, and the party are forced to flee as Godot rushes in and demands our arrest.
Oh, look at you, kid. You look near dead yourself.
Tell? What?
Seems you made it out in one piece, though.
Are you alive? But back there, you... Don't tell me you pulled some bloody trick. Just like Luis. Bloody hell, Tell. I thought
Basilio, sorry. From here on, you're taking the lead.
But why? I can't without you. Tell, I only made it this far because I followed you.
Don't give me that. You're the strong one. Me, I never knew where I was going. Basilio, protect the weak. Swear you'll do it, not for me, but for yourself. If you can do that, I'll always be with you.
Tell...
Don't give me that look. Well, this one's goodbye for now. You ready?
With this, Basilio awakens to the Berserker, and our final party member joins. Atlas have seemingly learned to have the final party member appear before they're joining to establish themselves and not suffer the Haru curse. Basilio and Fidelio are great throughout the Etria arc, and they add a lot to the party dynamics. You can tell the whole time Bass is wavering, but Fidelio, as the weaker, clings more desperately to Luis's promises. Ironic then that he would be the first to go in Luis's new world of strength. The second act concludes here with our party on the back foot, and Luis's victory seemingly secured. This is where I expected Godot's rise as the new secondary antagonist, Rella coming into play, possibly becoming a party member, and the final third of the game. But it doesn't really go that way. Forden's death shatters the Sanctus Church, and the shadowy interim leaders of Uchronia deem Rella a suitable successor as the Saint of Sanctism. Godot is none too happy about this, but is dismissed. The following day, Rella announces her intent to become queen, but is interrupted first by Godot and subsequently by Luis. With Dracodios firmly in his hands, he tells King Hythlodaeus that he must lift the royal magic, as Luis alone can pierce it. Luis is a meritocrat to an absurd degree, similar to Armstrong from Metal Gear Rising. That Dracodios provides him an unfair advantage is unacceptable, and he will happily give it up to even the playing field. The king abides, and our party then claims that our protagonist himself is the prince, long thought dead. Rella backs up this claim, but many remain skeptical, and Luis laughs it off before departing. With the royal magic gone, Godot attempts to attack Rella, but is enraptured in thorns, the same thorns that swirl around the prince. It was in fact Rella, forced by Forden, that cursed the prince. She then teleports away to the Mage Academy in the mountains to await a battle with us. I was loving the game at this moment, all the twists and turns of Rella as a surprise villain and where it would go. And the exact moment it drops the ball is when you gain the ability to fly immediately to the Mage Academy 5 minutes later. The journey aspect of map traversal is eliminated as you can reach anywhere on the map in one day, and the pacing suddenly accelerates to silly levels. You arrive at the Mage Academy, where I was expecting an entire dungeon, perhaps hinting at Mor's existence, the nature of this world's magic, and leading to a final confrontation with Rella. Instead, this all occurs just outside, with Rella summoning another dragon to fight. I get this is a fantasy game, but you fight a ridiculous amount of dragons throughout its runtime. The one in the intro, Dragon Temple, this one, 3 dragons from side quests, and the super boss, who is also just another dragon. 7 dragon boss fights. What the hell? It's such a downgrade from the unique and stylish bosses of Persona and SMT that you fight so many dragons. Is this Skyrim? The humans are the replacement, but they are few and far between. Metaphor clearly struggled with being conceptualized, as unlike most Atlas games, it had to start from scratch, with the demon designs of their other mainline titles relegated to brief cameos in the Devil Summoner abilities. Upon beating her, Rella reveals that Forden threatened Juna's life for her compliance, and that guilt has lived with her ever since, which is why she became such a virtuous saint for people. The curse that ensnares the prince is also slowly killing her, so she encases herself in ice to finally free the prince. Rella is a character that is both very important and also someone I expected much more from. She gets some scenes, but her time as the new head of Sanctism should have been longer as a third power, and her relationship with Juna further expanded upon. In any case, she magically speaks to all Sanctists and confesses her and Forden's crimes. This double tap pretty much knocks the church out of the competition, with the only real candidates remaining being the prince and Luis. And the breakneck pace doesn't let up, as we must now rush back to the capital to confront him. Returning to Grand Trad as our party meet Luis in the same place Grius attempted his assassination 3 months prior. The world is steeped in anxiety as all semblance of order collapsed with the Sanctists. Luis's ultras stalk the streets, basically acting like a paramilitary akin to the Brown Shirts, terrorizing any prince supporters. At our lowest moment, Luis uses a power to turn the protagonist into a human, lying that this is the true form of the Elda tribe and he has deceived the world. We manage to snap out of it, but the damage is done, and mimicking Persona 5, our popularity meter plummets. Luis also adds that he sent Zorba to the Eldan Sanctum to finally end the true prince's life and guarantee his victory. And so once again, our party rushes off. Straight to the Eldan Sanctum, we see Zorba has already rampaged through, and an old Ujif delivers the bad news. The prince is dead. I figured it was coming. We are too late in the story for the prince to be developed as a character. His role as a plot device he would take to his meager grave. The Eldan Sanctum may be short, but it is one of my favourite moments in the game, as the nature of the world, the prince, and your journey come to light. The song that plays when you reach the prince's body sets the scene of this unravelling mystery incredibly well. Noting that the Sanctum is the same place our characters appear when awakening their archetypes, it seems certain now that the voice guides us here for this exact moment. The weird fact that no one in the sanctuary remembers the protagonist despite him embarking with Gallica from here, it all comes to a head beside the prince's corpse and the pin drops. Our protagonist is not real. When the prince's curse grew so severe that he could no longer move nor open his eyes, our mother used her power to incarnate the form of the prince that was imagined while he read the novel. We are a creature born of Magla and given form. We only came into existence as Gallica was leaving, and she alone was originally tasked with the mission to find Grius. It adds up then why we are so hopelessly idealistic in our pursuits and actions. We are quite literally a fantasy protagonist. In Esperanto, ReFantazio means king's fantasy, and that has a further meaning later. But for now I feel it also represents us as the prince. We are fantasy, and it is our mission to be king. I honestly love this twist. It's the only way I see the story threading the needle that was the prince's character or lack thereof. I never really cared about the prince at all, and when he died I assumed it would then be on us to take his mantle to bring an end to monarchy, but no, the story has something else to tell instead that we'll get into in just a bit. To fuse the prince and our protag together makes sense. Bizarrely, we speak in a posh attempted English accent for I think literally 2 lines before going back to normal. I'm thankful. The VA just putting it on while surrounded by genuine accents was so jarring.
I feel fine, I think.
Then I hereby pronounce your sentence.
We also learn the true history of the world, which was known to us but not to our characters. This is a post-apocalypse. Humankind, swallowed by fear, went to war, and however way it happened, the survivors mutated over time to become the tribes of today. It's good that this is brought up because as our protagonist has just fused their ideal self with reality, so too does reality hit them in the face. That even if the tribal divisions eroded, and racism over immutable characteristics faded, people would still disagree, and fight, and struggle as they already did, and in doing so destroyed the world. And humans are remnants of those who succumb to the melancholia. As time passed, the name became associated with only monsters, and the new name of Elda was taken by the survivors. And also, the nature of magic igniters. Magic in this world is an inherently dangerous force, tangible, and in the world, like gravity, it is all around. You have those machines that suck magla out of the air, acting as a filtration system basically, and magic igniters to limit people's abilities. Unrestrained use of magic could lead to a second world-ending war, and the Sanctus Church seeks to prevent that. It gives them an interesting nuance beyond the evil church. Their intentions are sound and make sense. It's a bit of that order versus chaos dynamic that Atlas loves in SMT, showing up contrasting the safe yet oppressive mission of the Sanctus Church to Luis's chaotic view that only the strong have merit and deserve to live. And the final reveal, that Luis is from this village, and thus most certainly Elda. He saw Forden burn his home down, and in doing so most likely developed his ideology of strength, so that such weakness would never hurt him again. And since it is not just Elda, but all tribes that are descendants of humanity, the whole world could overflow with anxiety, and all who could not overcome would transform. The world of humans realized. Luis's victory would spell disaster, and the stakes rise. Our party attempts to chase Zorba down as he escapes the Sanctum, but we fail. And all that remains is a final showdown back at the capital. The final month is a land of contrasts. It contains some of my favourite parts of the game sandwiched alongside some of the most boring tedium I haven't felt since being 200 floors up Tartarus back in FES. Basically, there are 2 dungeons remaining. The King's Palace, which can be done anytime, and then the Tyrant Star on the last day. So besides the palace, you unlock a variety of side missions, and the back half of several social links unlock. In this time, I finished every link, completed every side quest, and completed the entire arena with 5 days to spare. I even purposefully wasted days, like taking 3 trips to beat the palace, and flying to get cooking ingredients a few times. The point being, the time system is not tight in this game, which is kind of nice. The balancing of MP versus taking multiple days to beat a dungeon has been a dilemma for 4 games now. In every Persona, I always do the dungeon in 1 day for maximum efficiency, and also because maxing every link in one playthrough is almost impossible to do blind. Metaphor relaxes this strictness, and I am glad, because a game that is already 100 hours long should not be designed to be beaten multiple times to see all the content. I'm fine with the super boss being locked, as it's more a fun side thing for players that have done everything. But anyway, you basically have 30 days to kill as you train up to face Luis. The enemies spike significantly, requiring many trips to many dungeons and grinding these side quests. Holy god, it got tiring. And mainly just because the side dungeons remain as dull as ever. There are some gimmicks, like the Volcano dungeon having so many floors and drops, or the teleporting in another dungeon, but for the most part you are running extremely dull fights, as even the combat system begins to fall apart at this point. You gain access to royal archetypes, which are cool as unlocks, but unfortunately push your party back into predetermined boxes a la Persona, when freedom of build variety was so engaging earlier and is what makes SMT so fun. Royal Prince never came off after I got it. It's just insanely powerful with the turn gain ability and the AoE nukes. Heisme and Basilios are broken. The other 4 are also OP, but I used them in their assigned roles for the whole game. But the fact remains, you can run Stroll as a mage, Hulkenberg as a warrior, and do alright. But by this point, if you don't go for their set archetypes, you are actively gimping yourself. Besides quadruple merchant memes, build variety implodes. Perhaps these royal archetypes could have worked better as having some of their strongest skills be inheritable like normal archetypes. Either way, you have a goal to grind for, and grinding you will do. It took me as many days to get to this final month as it took to beat it, despite the lack of story, because I just kept not wanting to grind for 30 hours through so many unvoiced and dull side quests. The game desperately needed a dungeon or 2 in between the final section. The fact that this is the only time you truly get to use Basilio is crazy. I will say, it's interesting as an experiment into a far more free-form version of this time management gameplay. You have free reign for so long to do whatever, and that experiment concludes as, I hate it. The focus is the best part. The time management works best when the plot is moving forward. The more breakneck, the better. The time should be there without being overbearing, and this was the complete opposite. It's like it was summer in Persona 3 again, with absolutely nothing happening, just social links and dungeon crawling with no story to be done. Now, the final month does have one great part to it, and that is the Trial of the Dragon. 3 powerful bosses await at the top of towers you would have previously explored if doing all side quests, and these fights were some of my favourite in the game. The dragon that sets all your party's health to 300 was the fight I struggled the most with. It's a genuine puzzle like some of the harder SMT bosses, and I enjoyed build crafting a way to counter its moves and create a strategy that guaranteed victory. I fought the fire nuke dragon last, which was funny because by that point you were given equipment that nulls fire, making him a cakewalk. Throughout these trials you speak to a fairy and learn a little bit about what the point of this all is. After beating all three, you return to Etria to face the Elegy of the Soul, a mirror of yourself that cycles through the various archetypes. This serves as kind of the super secret hard boss in the game, but I found him quite easy. Hulkenberg's high counter is just busted since if she blocks anything, every enemy turn is eaten. I do enjoy these mirror match style fights, and it was fun to get nuked walking in for wearing the dragon gear, which is ironically illegal in this fight. After beating the Elegy, you learn a little about the first king of Uchronia. The fairy that guided you is revealed to be the Gallica for that old king of yore, an apparently similarly naive and idealistic soul. She fades away after giving you the dragon's legacy, a sword that belonged to your mother, a narratively fitting final weapon that required beating the hardest side content to obtain, a fitting reward. Except, it's not the best sword in the game. You get that by unlocking every archetype on our protagonist, which gives you a kingly sword that does 70 more damage as well as making all allies immune to anxiety. An ability that is extremely useful when facing the final boss, so it's a damn shame that this narrative harmony of using your mother's old blade to face Luis is undercut by the fact that this random other weapon is so much better. You also lose this blade in New Game Plus and have to repeat all the trials to re-obtain it. Quite bizarre. I honestly think they should just switch these two, as the anxiety passive even fits with you having faced a literal manifestation of your anxiety to obtain it. Besides that disappointing reward, the trials were the best part of the final month. In this time, you also start and end Basilio's link, as well as finishing up Yufa, Katarina, Neuras, and Alonso. Katarina is a bizarre character. I will be forever shocked she wasn't a party member. It seemed like such a lock, and since her bond is finished so late, her passive ended up helping me for exactly one fight. She will jump in and do a percentage of an enemy's health in a dungeon, and this was that hard dragon fight I mentioned that caps your health. She can't come to the final dungeon, so that's all that's to it. Pure missed opportunity, and her window into the lives of the Parapus pales in comparison to Basilio's. It's nicer to have her than not, but it feels like she exists purely to bait gooners who see the scantily clad catgirl on the Steam screenshots into buying. Basilio, on the other hand, is pretty good. His link diving into the backstory around the Igniter experiments that the brothers were subject to in their youth, told alongside another fellow Parapus who never got out. Hearing how the rest were worked to the death for Fidelio and Basilio's escape adds a tragic layer to their freedom. And it's a cruelty the protagonist can't really alleviate, as it all occurred in the past. It ties too into Heisme's link concerning the death of his son during the Parapus riots, and the reason he hates Parapus. The riots were born from the conditions Parapus suffered under during these experiments, and this chain of events leads me to, on the one hand, completely understand the Parapus in their violent uprising against such horrific conditions, while also understanding Heisme's hate due to their unfortunate circumstances, even if I cannot truly justify it. No resistance movement is perfect, and when people are trapped and beaten, violence becomes inevitable. Look to the slave revolts in America, or to the IRA over here. A visit to the Belfast History Museum is an eye-opening look into how these conflicts lead to tragedy on all sides. And it's always good to remember who led to these troubles in the first place. The Sanctus Church. What were we talking about again? Anyway, you see so much Basilio in this final month as the only link that begins and ends here. You might be sick of the guy. He has a heart of gold, and his optimism fits our party of misfits perfectly. Basilio also gives a window into a side of Fidelio we never see. Behind his stern attitude, most likely born of trauma and the need to appear strong for his younger brother, Fidelio apparently liked to sing, and that could be also why he likes Juna so much, and also their desire to set up a restaurant together. It makes his untimely end all the more tragic. The brothers remain some of the most compelling characters in the game. Their relation with Juna adds some spice to the midsection, and Basilio's revenge against Luis is cathartic. It was him that struck the final blow on the boss, in fact. The palace final dungeon is whatever, really. You redo that padding for time mechanic like in Etria, with hunting down the knife-ear humans and killing them along with fighting a bunch of enemies you've seen before. The time or budget constraints become really clear here, and in the fact that the dragon trials are perfect asset reuse, along with Elegy of the Soul literally just being yourself again, assets that already existed. You again fight Zorba and he goes down shockingly easily. Hopefully gone for good this time. I don't really like Zorba much. His voice is fun for its uniqueness, but as a character, he's just kind of a deranged zealot. Reminds me of Death Jesus from Persona 3, who I also hated. Luis meets us in the throne room and we have a classic ideals clash. We learn that Forden's pogrom against the Elda led Luis to harden his heart and despise weakness. It's interesting that he read the novel like you and came to a far more twisted conclusion. That when the weak are gone, the strong will live under an equality of merit. Meanwhile, our party seeks to uplift the weak and level the playing field. Luis believes in bearing burdens and anxiety alone, while our protagonists understand that sharing in one's doubt and fears can help overcome. Dudes would literally steal the source of all kingly magic and destroy the world instead of going to therapy, basically. Luis ascends to the Magla vortex in the sky. The king's magic is powered by the anxieties of the entire kingdom, and it pools within a maelstrom further ahead. I had about 12 days of downtime after finishing this quest, and by the last 4 I was washing clothes, going to the sauna, and fishing with Heisme in preparation for the final battle. On the final day, you do the classic Atlas circuit of visiting all your confidants before the final battle. Usually this is done for the epilogue, but I appreciated it here. Basilio reminiscing about Del and Rella, Yuffie and Edeni continuing to sail the ship. I enjoy the calm before the storm feel of these conversations. Heading into the church in Grand Trad, you can find Godot, and his arc of all people was minor but fascinating to me. He was a flawed man, brash, jealous of Rella, and ultimately unpopular as a figure. He was a zealot and very dedicated to the church, but the church is more than just belief. Navigating the politics of the kingdom is an important part, one Forden excelled at, and one that Godot never understood. You can find the man utterly shaken, there to provide you purification services. Despite the implosion of the church, his faith in God remains, no longer of unbridled fury, but of silent repose. I never expected him to turn out this way. I expected him to possibly usurp Forden or kill Rella himself, but instead he concedes that he isn't strong enough. So the last quarter of the game has been mired in cost-cutting and asset reuse, but does the game stick the landing with its climax? Thankfully, the final dungeon is wholly unique. Not a retread of the palace, you instead take to the skies in a dramatic suicide mission. Atop the Tyrant star, you can no longer return. You are free to fully heal and restore your MP by returning to Neurus at any time. It makes no sense that you would have the time to just keep resting, but it's easy to mark it down as a gameplay convenience contrivance and move on. I spent far longer in this final dungeon than I should have, but I enjoyed grinding it multiple times. It's only 2 areas, quite small and filled with enemies you've already seen. You can refight every human boss in the game to weaken Luis, and upon learning this, I reloaded, as I wanted to face him at his full power for curiosity's sake. You even get an achievement for doing this. It's a cool little way of having a choose your own difficulty for the final boss, and it makes a noticeable difference. I ended up grinding the twin giant teeth that spawned to level my archetypes, getting the Prince and Yufa's ultimate weapons as the OTP, as well as every royal archetype. Maxing the Prince is almost mandatory for that final battle, as his sword prevents anxiety, which Luis will place upon the party frequently. You also get a crown that gives you a permanent extra half turn, which is incredibly useful for obvious reasons. I felt going in excited at the idea of fighting a super boss version of Luis while being OP through grinding myself. I'd much prefer it to an easy final boss with little effort needed. After proceeding through this simple enough dungeon, there is nothing left but to face Luis. Luis Guiaburn. The final question arrives: is he a good villain? I'm conflicted. On the one hand, he has aura. He steals the show in every scene he's in. His little speech before you face him on the Opera House roof was striking, and I like the fact that the man remains utterly convicted in his ideals the whole game, as a contrast to our protagonist. There is no 11th hour secret final boss akin to Persona 3, 4, and 5, and despite our yapping, Luis never really concedes to our point of view. He's a bastard to the bitter end. On the other hand, his plan fell kind of flat for me. I get the idea. Luis is a man who saw everyone he loved die powerless at the hands of Forden, and from that he concluded that weakness must not exist, and his plan to implement that is through unleashing the anxiety within the scepter upon the world again, where the weak would die or become humans, and eventually a world of only the strong would remain, those strong, resolute, and able to control their anxiety, solving the problem that troubles this world. It's insane, and silly, and a Luis that has a plan that genuinely rivals the idealism of the party would have been far more compelling. Perhaps a more realistic idea, playing into his concept of doing everything alone. He could become a leader of merit, him at the top by virtue of being the strongest, and from there he really would make the world safe. To choose a safe yet shackled existence over a free yet tumultuous life. And now I realize I've just reinvented the order versus chaos dynamic from SMT, but hey, it's compelling in that too. I'm just spitballing. The point is, Luis does not live up to the potential he showed at the beginning, but he's still great. I'm glad the final villain doesn't become Forden. Perhaps a more developed and changed Godot or Rella could have been the final foe, but as it stands, Luis works. Luis uses the scepter to compel the power of archetypes and transforms into sexy Lucifer. This phase goes down easy enough and he retreats to his gauntlet runner. The next scene was bizarre. Your party holds off hordes of humans while Neuros fixes up the gauntlet runner to fly after Luis with just you aboard. You get this seeming final stand with all your party sacrificing themselves to guarantee your escape, and you ultimately face Luis alone. I don't even really know why this part exists, since moments after catching up, Luis just nukes you, and after some internal struggle, you wake up and they're all beside you fine. What does this add beyond like the cheapest stakes possible for no time at all? It hints that their survival was an in-universe ass pull from the magic of people believing in them, but I find that kind of thing dumb and would rather this just never happen, since the plot could play out the exact same minus this sacrifice attempt, and it would have played out the same. Reverse a moment. Luis does blast us, and moments before we die, we enter the book. Academia, one last time. Moore reveals to us that the world we have spent all our time in is a fantasy, and begs our protag to come with him to the real world in Shibuya. It is finally revealed that Moore is to the king what our protag was to the prince, an idealized imaginary self given form via magic. While our protag keeps his ideals, Moore fell to the same cynicism that claimed the late king and begs us to stay. In the original Utopia novel, the author is Thomas More, and the book is narrated by the fictional Hythlodaeus. So the inversion in metaphor is funny because of course to them, Hythlodaeus is real and More is the fantasy. The real world of ours, More shows, is a fantasy in their world and in ours. It's a projection from the book, a mirror of the old world once seen beneath Etria. The world of the book does not exist, but belief in its fantasy can affect the real world. That's the main message of metaphor, and it is not done beating you over the head with it. You fight More in the most roadblock boss fight of all time. I purposefully didn't hit him so he could give dialogue. More commends us for not faltering, and we arrive back in the real world for the final showdown. Gallica roused us thanks to the statement that music was the first magic. A truth because magic in metaphor is born of human emotions, and music is a purest expression of the heart. Our entire party yells at Luis, cracking partially his ideals, and the anxiety, whether from him or the scepter, it's not clear, explodes around him, and Luis becomes the human destroyer Charadrius. It's JRPG tradition to fight God, so it is true to this fantasy that we face a human as the final boss, biblical look notwithstanding. This is possibly one of the best final bosses they've done. For one, it's actually hard. The fully powered version gets 8 turns, and a flurry of mechanics to deal with. The attack, which targets a specific tribe, is fantastic because it forces you to switch in and out every party member throughout the fight, allowing everyone to get a piece. Throughout the battle, I swapped everyone out, ending with Basilio, who struck the final blow. Luis and his 8 turns are broken, but our party is similarly broken, with Hulkenberg being able to eat all those turns with high counter, or Heisme with his ultimate dodge. The design of Phase 1 is based on the phases of Lucifer from Dante's Inferno, and his Phase 2 cracks open to reveal a seraphim-looking self. A cool detail is that the eyes on the wings match those of the 9 tribes. On the musical side, it's incredible. The first of all magic plays us out beautifully, mixing several motifs of Luis's theme and the Academia theme. When the music crescendos in that grand chant from Academia, it brought me back to the reintegration of Aria of the Soul during Persona 3's finale. It's great, in gameplay, in style, and in theming. It feels suitably final as a fight, and I was content. We awaken a last minute power-up, the King archetype, and kill Luis. He and the scepter dissipate. The reveal that magic as anxiety given form is a cool final revelation. Human emotion being a physical force akin to gravity is always fun, and now the object that let the previous kings herald the people's anxieties is gone. Uchronia will now have to face its strife on its own. It's a literal unshackling of the divine right of kings, yet even then a monarchy will remain. They weren't dismantled overnight in our world, and likewise will not here. But for now, our prince can become king and the day is saved. One final reveal is that the disembodied voice following us all along was our mother, so both our parents guided us in secret this whole time. If the game ended there, I would have called it disappointing, but my favorite part of the whole thing happens post-coronation. The game time skips a year ahead and we get glimpses at how the reign of our party has been going. This small epilogue walk around is so important to the overall theme of what I think Hashino and Co are trying to say with metaphor. 2 civil servants converse on a bench about how the world has changed. The party are now all in positions of power as the country recovers. One civil servant exclaims absurdity that a Ujif leads the Royal Knights, meaning racism hasn't been defeated. Obviously, you don't just annihilate decades of discrimination in 1 year. Our party is bogged down with politicking, and it is great to see them all in new outfits. Criminal that we don't unlock these as New Game Plus treats, since 3D models are made and everything. I really don't get it. You are then free to wander around town and learn some important things. First of all, most things haven't really changed. Discrimination still exists, Sunshade Row is still in poverty, the Mustari still can't openly worship, and Sanctism still dominates. The church is even rehabilitating its image and brushing its atrocities under the rug. Pretty one-to-one with real-life churches. I can always point to the Magdalen laundries run by the church in Ireland throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Abuse of women and children rife, look them up if you're interested. But despite such troubles, people still go to church and belief still exists. It wouldn't be belief if it was shaken so easily. Heisme points out that the king and his advisors, being of mixed tribes, already resonates a message leaning towards equality amongst the populace, even as far as rural villages. That a country is its people, but their leaders remain important as figureheads and representatives. Sailing the seas depends on the helmsman, I believe someone said that once, and it holds true. In pretty much all great societal shifts, progress came from both pressure from the people, but ultimately, the leaders would bend to pressure or whether they believed it themselves, particularly when it came to the fall of monarchy in the French Revolution. The most obvious comparison, that the monarchy was dispatched and restored several times with pseudo-monarchs like Napoleon taking its place. When the people have been accustomed to not thinking, forcing their independence is hard and required many years of trouble. Such things undoubtedly await Uchronia, possibly even covered in Metaphor 2. It is pointed out that the peace of the day and trust in the prince is more so because he slew Luis and restored order to the kingdom, but the people that support him for his ideals are ultimately far lesser in number. Rebellions arise outside Grand Trad, as candidate Julian mentions. The old guard and landowners are not happy. To experience this yourself, just go play a game of Victoria 3. A gate guard mentions that since the king is an Elda, Elda won't be disparaged publicly. This remains true to this day. It is no longer accepted to be openly racist for the most part, but the things people have said about black people here, when they think they're in good company, you'd think they were David Duke reborn. I have an anecdote about an older fellow who joked that while watching the Olympics, he could throw a banana at the screen to make the black runners run faster. Unprompted, like, what? Anyway, Eurus's notebook details that he's gotten into baking, a fun little side project that fits his character, as cooking too can be experimented with in the way inventions can. Elf Hitler remains, hinting at conflict in the future, and the beautiful candidate guy mentions something I thought about. It feels very nepotistic that all our party got high-ranking roles in the new monarchy. Another funny mention is a guy that laments that after all the strife of the previous year, that ultimately the son of the last king got in power anyway, and that tournament was for naught. I thought this too, that it goes against the idea of people making their own destiny and against hereditary monarchy, and acknowledging this dichotomy here makes me think it will be a plot point covered in a hypothetical metaphor too. Juna dons an adorable witch hat, now my one weakness, a grat! Sorry, lost myself there. And she found Moore's cat within the newly renovated Mage Academy. So Moore did exist in some capacity in reality inside the Mage Academy. It remains the biggest missed opportunity. Maybe we'll see it in some post-game DLC. Godot wants to reform the church to be true to its beliefs. Time will tell if he succeeds. My wife Yufa explains that the courts now allow people to represent themselves. No longer are people hung without trial. The marriage is coming in Metaphor 2, guys. I'm telling you. Barden speaks of the implementing of the townspeople's voices in administration and its struggles. Katharina interestingly hints at things beyond Uchronia's borders. It's a whole world out there of strange new places and peoples to see. In Metaphor 2. The Curious Woman is pretty funny for me, personally asking if because we're Elda, do we also know the Elda from the Sanctum that are visiting? We can respond sarcastically that all Elda must know each other, and she takes it at face value. It's funny to me because I have had this exact same interaction at times when some of the few other Asians around come up. So silly. Stroll offers some choice words as our first companion. At times it feels like he could have been the protagonist, with him taking the reins to talk to the people in Altabury and to challenge Luis, another symptom of a mostly silent protagonist. I hope our next hero talks as much as Stroll does. There is really no reason for our player not to. This whole section was so nice, ruined only by the fact that none of it is voice acted, which is absurd really. This of all things should have been VA'd. Luckily, the final goated confidant, Maria, is voice acted as we finally meet her at the church. To see her smile and dream of a brighter future made it all worth it. We are a team of idealists, and there is none so idealistic than a bright-eyed child with large aspirations. The party reconvenes and reminisces. It actually brings up your dragon slaying if you did those side quests, which is pretty cool. Hulkenberg is as stern and brash as ever as captain of the Royal Guard once again. The party does note that the far-off regions of the kingdom are hard to communicate with, and thus our king elects to travel the land and hear the people's woes. These kinds of royal tours happened in history too, so it fits. Eurus, Stroll, and Hulkenberg elect to join us with the others staying behind. However, the rest of the crew snuck along too anyway, along with Maria, who can finally see the world now that it is safe enough for her, as close to a picturesque storybook ending as one could hope. Absolute fantasy. Hythlodaeus, the narrator, speaks to us one last time, the player directly. He thanks us for partaking of their world, even though it is a fantasy to us. He hopes that in some way it impacts our world too. Moore wrote the fantasy novel our protagonist carried with him, depicting a world to strive for, and from those ambitions their real world changed. And therein lies the heart of Metaphor. Its desire to express that fantasy and art can change the world in real, material ways. That something is a dream until it isn't, which is an idea that can resonate with anyone. My idea to make this video and talk about this game was a fantasy, but locking in, and thanks to the impression Metaphor had on me, it became reality. Metaphor is, in this sense, the quintessential question of idealism versus realism, and its answer is that both mingle together to be given form. To childishly dream of things forever is pointless, yet to abandon all hopes of things ever getting better is similarly destructive. This is a centrism I can get behind. To quote a song from Pat the Bunny aptly titled "From Here to Utopia," "No one's gonna stop you from dying young and miserable and right. If you want something better, you gotta put that shit aside." I'd recommend the song. It's crusty, it's raw, but it comes from the heart, and is basically a far more nihilistic view of Metaphor's message. I'm not an idealist. I am not an anarchist like Pat was when writing that song, but I can respect the dream that things can be better infinitely more than those doomers who think it's already too late. To persist is to live, and fantasy does help in its own little way. I think there's a word for using a thing to represent a facet of something else in order to get across a point. It's a metaphor. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helped you attain a bigger appreciation for Metaphor. I think it's a fantastic first entry in Atlas's so-called Third Pillar series. Very excited to see where it goes, and play it if you haven't. I don't even know why you're here if you haven't, but fair enough. Next video is on a smaller indie game I've wanted to cover for a while. Look back video is coming when I'm ready. If you don't understand the thing with the Rani plushie at the start, go watch my Shadow of the Erdtree video. Other than that, bye bye.
I'm not saying that we can't change the world, 'cause everybody